What would you say if I asked you, what is your worldview? Or, maybe said another way, what would you say if I asked you, what has formed your worldview? How do you understand your worldview? Or, how intentional are you about the things that are forming your worldview? You see, a lot of people don't even realize that they have a worldview. The question is not, do you have a worldview, but is your worldview true? Is it coherent? Does your worldview help you navigate the world around you? And is it based upon true aspects that can be validated and trusted? All right, well, welcome back. Today we're talking about worldviews, and this is a topic that's very close to my heart because as I studied worldviews under Dr. David Nagel, he has a book on worldview that you can go buy on Amazon, I believe. Go check that out. He has since passed. He's with the Lord. But as I studied worldview, 20-something years ago under Dr. Nagel, I realized just how powerful a worldview is. And because of that, having a bad worldview or a worldview that is incoherent can be just as bad, just as powerful, just as destructive. It can create cognitive dissonance. It can cause all sorts of problems, not only in your personal life, but within your sphere of influence. So today we're not going to be talking about one specific thinker, but we're going to be tracing worldview formation throughout philosophical and spiritual thought. We're not going to hit every single point, but maybe some of the main thinkers that have brought us to the point that we are today. And then hopefully you'll find different aspects of your worldview and help you to identify things that are beneficial or maybe things that are not, and be more intentional about your own worldview, how you navigate the world, and recognize, is your worldview coherent? Does it help you navigate the world around you? And is it based in truth? So, first off, what is a worldview? Well, a worldview is a framework which we utilize to interpret reality. And because of that, everybody has a worldview. Now, I know that sounds like I'm painting with a large paintbrush, that maybe some people don't have a worldview. No, everybody has a worldview. Every single person. Most people, their worldview is caught rather than taught. What does that mean? Most people, they gather their worldview throughout life. They pick it up from their parents. They pick it up from culture. They pick it up from teachers, from music, from books, from fairy tales. This is why we tell little kids fairy tales about Hansel and Gretel, right? Don't go wandering off in the wilderness and wander into some random person's house because they might eat you. What we're really telling them is you can't trust predators out there because some people are predators and they don't look like it, right? And so we're not telling those specific words. We're not using that specific framework of addressing difficult concepts. Instead, we kind of hide truth in these fairy tales that build out our worldview. Now, sometimes we are very specific and very truth and factual oriented with worldview creation. And this is what we see through the philosophers. So the past couple thousand years, when you track philosophical thought, you see philosophers trying to create a worldview. A worldview is our most fundamental assumptions about truth, reality, morality, purpose. And so you can see that these are what the philosophers and theologians have been seeking after for thousands of years. Your worldview answers questions like, what's real? What does it mean to be a human? what's wrong with the world? What's the solution? Do I have meaning? Do I have purpose? How do I interact with people around me? Do I care only about my tribe, my culture, or do I also care about other tribes and other cultures? This is what a worldview fundamentally explains, although you may not even realize that when you're answering questions in your life, that you're pulling those answers from your worldview. So a worldview is like a map or a lens. So if you've ever used an outdated map, which nowadays, we use Waze or Google Maps, something like that. Back in the day, whenever I first started driving, we had physical big maps, right? And you had a whole state map, and then you'd have I remember Maps Quest, and you would print off maps that tell you how to get from here to there, and you'd have these prints. You'd print off from a printer, and you would follow that map, and it would tell you how to get from somewhere to somewhere else. And sometimes those roads were under construction, and so the map that you had was not as accurate as you would hope it would be. Sometimes there were new roads that weren't accounted for on the map. And so this is a great example of what happens whenever our worldview is out of sync with the world around us. So sometimes our worldview tells us something about the world, but then when we engage with the world around us, the world doesn't actually act that way. And when that happens, we have a cognitive dissonance, and that can cause major issues, identity issues, anxiety. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But we recognize that these are important concepts to us. And so a map of the world, or a lens through which you look through the world, will help to better interpret the world around you. So interestingly enough, the glasses on my face, they actually change the shape of how my eyes see reality, and as they bend the light and reshape the world, it helps me interpret the world better, right? And then every once in a while, I have to. In fact, I need to do this now. I have to go back to the doctor and get a checkup and say, oh, this prescription is out of date, right? And you need a new prescription. And sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we have to look at our own worldview and say, you know what? Our general assumptions about the world are not true. And we need to adjust that. So intentionality when it comes to worldview formation, creation, adjustments, I think, is important. So let's kind of trace some of the philosophical thought. We're going to be jumping over literally thousands of years as we do this, but let's look through some of philosophical thought and look to see how some of the philosophers have traced worldview, how they've looked at worldview. Understand this word worldview was not utilized throughout history. It's a fairly new concept. The word itself, it comes from the German Weltanschauung, but the philosophers have been struggling with this concept from the beginning of philosophy. And so the concept of a worldview is not absent from philosophy or theology, although the word may not be in Plato's work or Descartes' work or Kierkegaard's work, but you do see the ideas in there. So let's start with Plato, always my favorite philosopher to start with, and he has the cave analogy, right? If you're not familiar with the cave analogy, he says, let's imagine a world where there are people who are chained up in a cave and their eyes are fixed forward, looking at a wall, and behind them is a fire, and that fire moves and shifts and kind of sparks and stuff. And as that happens, the shadows on the wall in front of these people move and bounce as shadows do around a fire. And then somebody from outside the cave comes in, sees these people chained, and starts to explain to them, hey, what you're seeing is not real. This is not reality. These are shadows on the wall, and there's a fire behind you that is bumping, jumping, and sparking and causing the shadows to bounce in front front of you. And some of those people get really upset because this is all they know. And so reality to them is the shadows on the wall. And they get really mad and they actually want to kill the guy who is telling them the truth. Well, eventually this person unchains somebody and shows them the fire, and they could see the reality of the fire, and that's groundbreaking and life-changing. So their worldview is changing as they interface with more of reality as they never really understood it before, but as they can recognize as real. And then they start going out the mouth of the cave. They come out and they see the light and the grass and the sun and trees, and the light kind of burns their eyes because they've never seen the sun before, but it's brilliant and it's awesome, and the vivid colors of the grass is groundbreaking and life-changing for them. And you have to imagine, if this were a real story, that somebody's worldview has been broken, has been reshaped, and is probably a difficult thing for them to comprehend and deal with. So Plato was talking about worldview, and the more that we come in contact with reality around us, the more that we study and explore, the more that our reality will change. Some people will get mad and will hate you as you challenge their worldview, because it's just better, it's easier, it's more comfortable to accept the worldview of the shadows on the wall. Some people will be hungry for the actual truth, and they will seek that thing out, and they'll follow you out the mouth of the cave. And so we see that Plato was thinking through this concept, and he understood that your worldview determines how you interpret reality. So those who are chained, looking at the wall, their worldview tells them that all there is shadows. And so that's reality to them. That's their worldview. That's what they hold to, they cling to. Trying to explain a sun or a tree to them is beyond their comprehension. It does not fit within their worldview. And because of that, it's upsetting. You're creating a cognitive dissonance. There are two things that they can't hold in reality in their own head, and so they reject it. They just cling to this broken, outdated, bad worldview because it's comfortable. That's what they know. And then you have the person who goes and actually searches out and seeks out truth, and it's difficult. It hurts. It burns your eyes. There's a physical pain associated with understanding a new worldview. Sometimes it's very practically. Sometimes it's because you're reading a book and something that you've never read before, and you're staying up late at night and you're excited, and but you're exhausted, right? And every single night you stay up reading that book or that new author. There's a physical stress that your body goes under, but there's even more of a mental stress. And so this is Plato's cave analogy. Aristotle will kind of pick up the conversation, but he points it in a different direction. Aristotle says, he talks about the telos, or the purpose, the end goal for everything. Aristotle said that everything has a purpose. So all of the created order around us has some sort of purpose built into it. There's meaning in reality. It's not invented. And this is helpful because when you see a tree, you say, oh, there's purpose in that tree, right? It provides shade, it provides fruit. So why is that tree there? Well, I can build tools out of it, I can get shade from it, I can build a house. And so there's a telos, there's a purpose in that tree, and that's awesome to know and recognize. There's meaning there. And then sometimes this concept can be unhelpful, right? You're walking by and you get bit by a snake. What's the purpose of that snake, right? What's the telos there? What is the meaning built into that snake? When you first get bit, dude, there's no meaning. It's just painful. I don't like this. And so this is a challenge for the Aristotelian concept of telos within the created order. But we can start to recognize that things around us might have meaning, might have purpose. We might be able to utilize those things. And then we're gonna jump ahead because we can do this all day. But Descartes is interesting because he shifts the concept philosophy from kind of outside of us to the individual. So cogito ergo sum, right? I think, therefore I am. We just did a video on this last week, I think. Go back and watch that. if you're interested in this. So Descartes begins this modern shift of philosophical thought towards the self, the thinking self. He says, I don't know if I can trust anything else around me. Whenever I stick a stick into the water, it looks like it bends, but then I pull it out of the water and it's straight, right? So I understand that the world around me bends and reshapes light. And sometimes the world looks different than it really is. And I don't know if I can trust that. And sometimes I have very vivid dreams that seem like reality, but then I wake up and it's not. And there's a real reality around me. How do I know that this is real reality and it's not a dream? And so he kind of breaks it down to its very basic concept of, well, the one thing that I know for sure is that I'm thinking. And if I'm thinking, then I'm alive. I'm real. And that seems to work for about 400 years. And then we start building computers. And it certainly seems like the computers are thinking, right? AI and the like. And so does that mean that the computers are alive, that they're real? Personally, I reject that concept. I think that they're, large language models are just utilizing very well-developed computations and algorithms, and kind of beyond my understanding there, but they're doing these computations that you put an input in and the output comes out. I don't believe they're alive. I don't believe that they're real, as in like personality. That being said, this concept of AI really challenges Descartes' cogito ergo sum. So is AI real? Well, based upon Descartes' cogito, you would say, well, I guess, yeah, but I kind of reject that. So Descartes gets us closer to modern thought, a modern worldview, but we also have to see, but there's a failure there. And then Kant, if we're looking at Immanuel Kant, German thinker, he talks about mental categories, that somehow in our head we have these kind of buckets of thought, right? That you are you're interpreting reality through. You take an information, you put that information in this bucket, and that piece of information goes in that bucket, and you have these kind of mental categories, these mental concepts, a paradigm up here that you're interpreting the observed reality through. You're filtering reality through these concepts, these buckets, these categories. This is the prototype of a worldview. Kant articulating this idea of mental categories gets us closer to a worldview. And then we see Friedrich Nietzsche talks about the death of God. He talks, and we've talked about this a couple weeks ago as well. Go back and watch that video if you're interested in Nietzsche and Christian worldview, and how do Christians interpret and utilize Nietzschean thought. Nietzsche talks about the death of God, or rather, he didn't believe God was alive in the first place. He believed that Christianity had failed as an institution, as a world view, and quite literally it had. The Christian worldview at that time had failed, and the institution had failed. It needed to be intentionally updated. There were more concepts, more ideas that we could build out a more robust worldview that better helped interpret the world around us, and yet we had not done that. We as Christendom had held on to these outdated, archaic concepts. Not that Christianity itself is outdated or archaic, but that the concepts that the worldview that we built from Christianity was outdated and archaic. I still hold to Christian doctrine. I believe all that's true. But when we build a worldview from Christianity, worldviews can become outdated. And this is what Nietzsche had pointed out. And from that, he says that there is a collapse of meaning in the world. There is a worldview crisis. This is where you get nihilism. Like, hey, if there is no God, then there's nothing. Nothing matters. If there's no grounding for morality in God, then there is no morality. You get kind of subjective morality. I decide what I want. And he recognized that nihilism was the real worldview. Nothing matters if God doesn't exist. And I would agree with him. If God doesn't exist, nothing matters. I think he articulated that correctly. Now, I reject the assumption that God doesn't exist, but point taken, right? Logically, you're accurate. If there is no God, then there is no purpose. If there is no God, then there is no value to human life other than what you assign to it. And I don't have to assign any value if I don't want, or I can assign ultimate value. That's up to me. And so Nietzsche talks about how there's this crisis. Everybody has their own worldview, and nobody knows what we agree upon. And then Søren Kierkegaard, he talks about how truth has to be personally lived out, embodied. That worldview is not just intellectual, it's existential. What you understand about the world has to be put into practice. And this is one of the things I love about Kierkegaard, is he always challenges us to live out what we believe about the world. And so there's a lot of faith in Kierkegaard, because he believes that we have to live out our faith. But there's also just intellectual ideas that we have to live out. And we talked about Kierkegaard recently as well. The crowd is untruth, right? So go back and check that out. What's great about these thinkers is they are challenging the worldviews of their day. The assumptions that everybody had, generally speaking, they're challenging these concepts, and they're saying, hey, the worldview around us does not accurately describe the world that we live in. It's not coherent. It's not helpful to navigate the world. There are new challenges that other generations did not have, and we have new challenges, and we need to intentionally review our worldviews and update them accordingly. So worldviews matter. But unfortunately, these philosophical thinkers, they get us to a point, but not far enough. And so we're constantly having to be intentional about our own worldviews. And we understand that worldviews matter, but they're not fixed. We have to continually, intentionally update our worldviews, because they shape morality and identity and politics and meaning and purpose and business and economy. It shapes all aspect of our life. And so let's say, for example, if your worldview states that reality is only material, then humans are just biological machines. They don't have invested value. They only have the value that you personally assign to them. And so subjectively, we could all disagree upon human value. Whereas if reality is created and purposeful, then humans have dignity and purpose and value from their creator. And so you have a grounding for the value of those people. And so real life decisions are impacted here. So this is why Kierkegaard is so important to me, because he's revealing to us that these philosophical concepts, kind of under the surface of where most of us intellectually operate, these philosophical assumptions will change how we interface with others in the world. And so you could have people like Nietzsche who influence, not to say everyone who is a Nietzschean is influenced in this way, but you could see how Nietzschean thought influenced the events of World War II, influenced the Germans, specifically a couple Germans, just to name a few. Yet we understand that worldviews are powerful, that ideas are powerful, and that bad ideas can hurt people. Bad worldviews can cause devastation upon generations. And so we see that where we are today, we've inherited a crisis of worldview. So many people believe that in a materialistic worldview, that there is no God, there is no meaning, that you self-assign meaning to the world around you. And so we have relativism, nihilism, loss of meaning, identity confusion. Who am I? Do I get to decide that? Does society decide it? Does God decide it? Is there a God? And so we see that Nietzsche predicted this crisis. He understood that this is what was coming because of the broken worldview that his culture had inherited. And I love how Dietrich Bonhoeffer articulates this crisis, specifically in when he's talking about cheap grace. That when you don't have an active faith in God, and yet you're a Christian, so he was specifically talking to the German Lutherans of his day, that if you're just a cultural Christian, you don't have a costly grace. You don't have a personal faith. This creates a crisis of worldview in culture. And we also just recently did a video on Bonhoeffer and cheap grace. Go back and check that out. But when the foundations of reality are challenged and become unclear, life becomes unstable. Because you don't know how to answer the bigger questions in life. You don't know what decisions to make. You don't know what to vote for, right? You don't know which party to vote for. You don't know what type of work to go into. Is it important to save lives? Is it important to help underprivileged people? All of these concepts affect our daily life. And when these the worldview that we have, when it's incoherent, it creates a crisis, a worldview crisis, an intellectual crisis that we don't really know how to proceed. And we see a lot of people at that point. They don't know who they are. You don't know your identity. You don't know your own value. You question if you have value in the first place. And so we see that it's not just bad for individuals, it's bad for culture. And this is where the scriptures come in. So the scriptural worldview says that we have creation, fall, redemption. So what's real? The world around us is real. God created it with purpose. It's created and it's ordered. The fall. Why do we have evil and suffering in the world? Well, we have sinned, and that sin has separated us from a perfect, holy God who loves us, but we have separated ourselves from him, and we actively separate ourselves from him as we sin. And yet there is redemption, there is hope, there's restoration through Jesus Christ. Faith in Christ offers that restoration, that redemption. And so creation, fall, redemption is the arc of the biblical narrative, but it's the foundation of a biblical worldview. It helps us interpret the world around us in such a way that it can accurately account for everything in the world. And this is why C.S. Lewis would say that Christianity explains reality like a key explains a lock. C.S. Lewis understood that while we may not have every answer to every question, that Christianity, a Christian worldview, helps us to accurately explain the world around us, even if we have to say, I don't know the ultimate answer. I don't know why God would allow this, but what I can tell you is that God loves us. We are sinners. We are broken. We live in a broken world because of our sin, and yet Jesus Christ came down, died, took our punishment for us, and brings about the opportunity for atonement with the Father. And so C.S. Lewis, if you haven't read him, he's great. We might do a video on C.S. Lewis sometime soon. I know I've talked about him in some shorts before, but if you want us to do a video on C.S. Lewis or Mere Christianity, let me know. He's not just a theology dude, he's a philosophical dude, a modern dude, very smart. Love him. But the real question is, can your worldview accurately explain the world around you? Does your worldview have logical holes or inconsistencies? Do you ever experience cognitive dissonance because your worldview somehow, some way is insufficient or broken or unintentionally has been changed or redeveloped, redefined because of culture around you, because of movies you've watched, music you listen to, books that you've read? Is there something that's influenced your worldview in such a way that is non-beneficial? Is your worldview reliable? These are all questions that we have to ask ourselves. And I would tell you, utilizing Scripture as a foundational book, foundational wisdom for worldview development is of the utmost importance. I wholeheartedly believe this. But we use many things to undergird our worldview. This is why, so you probably don't know this about me, but I'm in a band. I write music. This is one of the reasons why I write music, because I believe that art around us helps develop, undergird our worldview. And I think that it's important to have artists in the world creating great art to develop worldviews. We need to have good books, right? We need to have great authors writing things that develop our worldview. We need to have good games that teach us great things about life. So every aspect of our life somehow, some way influences our worldview. The question is, are you being intentional about the things that are forming your worldview? Or are you sitting back and allowing anything and everything to influence your worldview? I would challenge you to be more intentional, more restrictive of the things that are influencing your worldview. That doesn't mean that you just don't watch anything or don't read anything or don't play any games, but maybe be cautious of the things that are influencing your worldview. Sometimes I just have to turn movies off or turn music off, and I'm a big music lover, but I just had to turn it off because I recognize that thing is going to develop my worldview in a way that is unhealthy and non-beneficial for me. The scriptures tell us to hold every thought captive, and I believe that's because God created us as people, individuals who have a worldview. And so God understood that we are going to be taking a lot of information in throughout the day. And sometimes the information that we receive is going to be bad information. And so we need to hold those thoughts captive. Much like a police officer takes somebody into custody, and then you have an investigation that ensues. Do we trust this thing? Do we not? As you have thoughts come into your life, into your mind, hold those thoughts captive, investigate them, interrogate them. Is this a thought that's beneficial? Is this something that should influence my worldview? This is also why Paul would say in Romans 12 that we need to have the daily renewing of our mind. Your worldview is not fixed, and it will change throughout life. You can be intentional about the things that are forming your worldview, or you can sit back and allow the world around you to influence and develop your worldview for you. I would suggest that you be more intentional about the things that are influencing your worldview. Hey, listen, everybody, I love y'all. Again, a great conversation on worldview. I hope you found this beneficial. If so, please like, share, subscribe, comment in the bottom. If there's a thinker that I've missed, somebody like maybe Thomas Aquinas or Augustine or somebody like that I should have added in, jump in the comments below, school me, tell me about how wrong I am and how I got one of the philosophers wrong or something like that. I am always happy for critiques and conversation. Let me know if there's other topics you'd like to talk about. I love y'all. We're going to be back here next week. I will chat with you later.